All right. The clock has hit 9:30, and so in interest of trying to keep this as brief as possible, I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Gary has informed me that Dr. Hafner is going to be running a little bit late, and we've got Virgil online, it looks like, this morning. So, and Dr. Armstrong, sorry. So Gary, if you would be so kind, could you go ahead and please call the roll?
Dr. Armstrong.
Aye.
Keith Beer.
Aye.
Virgil Bremer.
Aye.
Brad Fisher.
Aye.
Dr. Hafner. Dr. Hall.
Aye.
Dr. Hartwell.
Aye.
Ty Harberger.
Aye.
Larry Hopkins.
Yes.
Dr. Ragland.
All right. Thank you, and before I forget to say, thank you to everyone for making the time to be here either in person or on time today. I know this is not one of our regularly scheduled quarterly meetings, but I think this, with the things that we've got on the agenda today, this could be probably one of the most important meetings that could be the most important meeting that we have throughout the year with the things that business we need to conclude today. Hopefully everyone had a chance to read the minutes from our July meeting and everything else that Gary, all the other information that Gary has sent out. Does anybody have any corrections, deletions, additions to the minutes? If not, could I entertain a motion to approve?
I so move.
Could I get a second?
I'll second.
Gary, could you please call the roll?
Question is adoption of the July 14th minutes. Dr. Armstrong.
Aye.
Keith Beer.
Aye.
Virgil Bremer.
Aye.
Brad Fisher.
Aye.
Dr. Hafner. Dr. Hall.
Aye.
Dr. Hartwell.
Aye.
Ty Harberger. Aye. Larry Hopkins.
Aye.
And Dr. Ragland. Dave Hart, sorry.
Yeah, aye. All right. Talked with Dr. Ragland yesterday, so I don't know if he's, held up in traffic or not. Yes. Gary, do we want to, he told me that he was going to be fine after we took the motion. Took the motion up that he was going to be fine.
Right, I think anybody can use to take it from the.
Yep. All right, so we left over, in old business left over from the last meeting, we had tabled Dr. Ragland's, speaking of that.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Dr. Ragland, just to kind of bring you up to speed, we've just gotten going, and Gary called the roll, and we approved the minutes of the July 14th meeting. So we were just getting ready to move on to take your motion from the July 14th meeting from the table. So I don't know if you want to move to do that, or we can get someone else to.
Oh, I'm happy to do that.
All right.
So,
Okay.
I moved to, remove the motion, to fund the construction of the diagnostic lab from the table.
Okay. All right. Off the table and back on the floor. The next thing, sorry.
You need a second and a vote.
Okay. Can I get second on that? Second. And can we take it by consensus, Gary, or do we need to take a roll?
You take a roll call since we have
Okay.
virtual participation.
Okay,
And the question is then on taking from the table to put back on the floor, Dr. Ragland's motion from last meeting to approve the ADL capital requests for $149 for new lab and $21 million for Southern Indiana lab. Dr. Armstrong.
Aye.
Keith Beard.
Aye.
Virgil Bremer.
Aye.
Grant Fisher.
Aye.
Dr. Hafner. Dr. Hall.
Aye.
Dr. Hartwell.
Aye.
Ty Harberger. Aye. Larry Hopkins.
Aye.
Dr. Ragland.
Aye.
Dave Hart.
Aye. All right, now that the motion is back on the floor, I guess any discussion about what we would like to do with it at this point?
Okay, so I
Right.
move to rescind the motion, that the board would, support, request for funding for a new diagnostic lab.
All right, Dr. Ragland has made a motion to withdraw motion that is on the floor.
Second.
Okay, Virgil has seconded it. Any no discussion, then we'll just do that by consent. Okay. Very good. All right, that I think takes care of old business. So moving on to new business, discussion of 2028 ADDL budget and capital requests. So, Gary, were we going to have this discussion, or were
Yeah, I mean,
Dr.
you have in your packets the additional information that was provided by the ADL. And so I don't know if Dr. Hendricks or Dr. Bowen want to talk about that.
Yeah, I where would you like me? Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and board, for hearing us today and having this special session to revisit this topic with everything. I know this takes away from your days, but we appreciate the opportunity to discuss this further and answer any questions that you may have following the previous discussion and time that you've had since then to follow up with your stakeholders and constituents for your areas with everything. Before you do have a copy of the one-page document that we put together. Our takeaway from the previous meeting was additional information regarding the project, but really also the increased capacity for testing, for which we'd be able to do with the changes and increase in size, primarily to the West Lafayette Laboratory Facility. So we tried to document and put some of those numbers together for you with what we have here. One of the things that we see as a challenge with trying to answer that question is just, it's hard to make it an apples to apples comparison. There's not a direct correlation increase per square foot that goes along with the amount of testing that can be done to that. There's a lot of factors that play into that, into the type of laboratory, the throughput for which they do, the specialities, and the types of tests that are occurring in there, and how those numbers can change and fluctuate so much based off of those different factors and just what the demand technologies and throughput are going to be that play along with that. For that, we've tried to assign some numbers that go along with that. You'll see that we used a benchmarking schematic to try and take a comparison and average of 3 different laboratories of Iowa, Ohio, and Michigan, to take from their building size and their test numbers that they do for how those numbers could potentially come together, and really a theoretical projection of what that could be. We've also noted several caveats in there as far as some of the specialities that those labs do and how those things focus into creating those numbers that go along with that. Additionally, Dr. Hendricks had talked about the Perkins and Will study that we have done over the last 5 years and all of our work up to this point to go through and assess what we really need, and figures that they were able to provide us looked at benching space, so linear feet of bench space as well as workstations and equipment for what we currently have and how in the new facility that would go. So you can see with those different numbers, we have either essentially a twofold increase up to a little over a fourfold increase, just to kind of show the breadth and really variation that exists. And again, that is more of a full capacity up and running with all the different programs, because we do have a lot of expansion and growth that we were expecting, as well as additional services that we were planning to add in those laboratory spaces that hit on client producer demands and interest areas, as well as improved efficiencies, as well as maintaining the ability for preparation for high consequence diseases and those high throughput scenarios, as well as the increased containment with the added addition of the BSL-3 facilities that play into that. One of the things that doesn't get hit on as much that goes along with that is the consideration that here in Indiana, our lab is meant to be the one-stop shop for the state regulatory side of things, as well as the university. Being there situated at Purdue University puts us in a unique position that not all other diagnostic labs fit in. You have there's three categories essentially. You have state diagnostic laboratories that are doing regulatory work with additional components that go along with it. You have other diagnostic labs that are at the university and associated with the College of Veterinary Medicine. And then you have the combination where you have laboratories that operate under both capacities. And that's where we fall at, with us being located in West Lafayette with the Purdue College of Veterinary Medicine, where we are directly engaging in the regulatory activities and those high consequence disease responses, in addition to providing the plethora of other additional diagnostic tests for our companion animals, as well as the animal ag industry with those livestock species, in addition to our mission to provide education to that next generation of veterinarians, those veterinary students and veterinary technician students that are coming through the College of Veterinary Medicine, doing their rotations with us to learn how to do necropsy or autopsy procedures, providing that collaboration and research component that goes along with it with the faculty and researchers on the college, as well as having direct faculty in our staff that are involved directly and primarily with research capacities as well. All of those activities tie into space needs that a private or state regulatory only laboratory would not have to account for, that we've compensated and included within the plan before you that we've discussed to account for the teaching needs, but then also as the college and the university look to expand the class size from the current 84 DVM students up to the 120 in the future, that we needed to account for space for the teaching and education of those students to go along with what we have there. Additionally, we've got some different, the benchmarks are in there, the staffing increases that could go along with that. Again, the other point to make with this is like future full capacity running. It's not going to be day one when we open the doors, we're automatically going to be cranking out 500 to 700,000 tests. This is establishing and preparing us for the long term and for the future, for a building that's going to meet the needs, not just today, but several years from now and decades as the lab continues to grow, as we have over the past several years, and as we see with the growing presence of avian influenza and the concern with other high consequence diseases, as well as the preparation for what's next. What don't we already even have on our radar that we don't know? And that's where having the modernization, the high throughput capacities for the PCR, but then also those biosafety features with the BSL-3 laboratory space to be able to handle certain things that we may not be eligible to handle or work on to provide those diagnostic services. So all of those things go into the creation and the layout that we worked with on Perkins and Will to come up with the plan that we have here. Additionally, on this page, we do kind of note through the different options and the different laboratory locations, and how at the main laboratory, I've talked about several of these things already with the biosafety component, the addition of additional laboratory spaces for different test modality types that we currently don't offer, but want to and plan to offer in the future. Additionally, talking about the Southern Laboratory, that satellite facility, the importance that it has in providing services to that area and continued growth, the potential Northern Satellite Laboratory and how it could be beneficial to the diagnostic system, as well as the producers and the northern region. And then one part that doesn't get talked about as much, but noted here for you all, is just with main laboratory in West Lafayette, if we do have a new facility, a new structure, the current facility would be able to be returned to the college to meet a growing demand for research space, for faculty and other PIs that go along with things, as well as this increased class size to 120, how there's limitations for working space. And one option and things that's been discussed is utilizing the current necropsy floor as a potential future anatomy lab, because the current anatomy lab, for those that have gone through the DBM program, know the size that it was when we had 70 people in there. Now it's 84, going up to 120. The amount of space for that many students, the amount of cadavers that they need to work on is inadequate for what they would need, and they would need additional space. So this would serve as a dual purpose of being able to replenish an additional need that's going to be created. Lastly, I'll point out that we went ahead and included the graph in the bottom right that ties in just the past growth for some of our major ag industry, livestock pieces, and just the growth that has been seen over the last several years, and is projected to continue on with some growth and things that way. And from that, we can establish a correlation that the more animals that are there, the more diagnostic services that are going to need to occur, where we fit into that equation of things for providing those diagnostic services, as well as being prepared for whatever may come with those industries. We saw the rise of PED several years ago. That wasn't on anybody's radar. That required a large response at the time, and has continued to be a surveillance program for the swine industry. On the poultry industry, we've dealt with egg drop syndrome. We've dealt with avian metapneumovirus popping up, and then of course, everybody's very familiar with high-path avian influenza that ties into that. So a lot of this plays into that insurance policy discussion that we've had over time, having the facilities being that best-in-class laboratory facility and being prepared for what the future is. And to close out, the last piece that we have there are just what we kind of took from that discussion as the 4 options to take and use as you see fit, of the new addition or the new laboratory in West Lafayette, including a new satellite facility, not doing a new laboratory and just doing renovations to the current facility that we have. That number, we assigned a $20 million figure. Dr. Hendricks described previously how we came up with that figure from a previous project where we had assessed the value and the needs that were going to be attributed to that project, about $24 million. From the state a few years ago, we did receive about $4 million that we have invested towards improvements to our necropsy facility. So taking that $4 million off of the 24 is where we landed at with that $20 million. Definitely would require additional exploration if we go that route. And then the others, the 3A, 3B, including the proposed northern satellite component as a potential addition that would play into things. So the big thing that I think we wanted to do was just really try and answer that question for you all, as far as how do we establish what that true caseload increase would be with a larger facility. Hopefully I've shared enough to let you all appreciate how that's not as easy of an answer as what we would like it to be, since it's not a linear direct comparison or growth that goes along with it. But I'm happy to entertain and try and answer any questions that you have regarding that document, anything we've discussed to this point, or anything else that you'd like to talk. And Dr. Hendricks is online virtually, so she's able to chime in. And then Dr. Marsh is here as well to help answer any of these questions.
Thank you, Dr. Bowen. Does anyone have questions for Dr. Bowen about what he's talked about on the one pager that was sent, or for anything else? I know, a lot of us would have, if we'd had more time. Oh, yes, go ahead.
No, but right here now.
I was going to say, I know we would like to have been able to have Perkins and Will give us maybe a little more refined report saying these are, I feel like the report that we got with the numbers was let's be everything to everyone. I think it would have been nice if we could have looked at, what are Indiana's, strategic strengths and what are our needs, or maybe, we could have refined that number a little bit, but that's not the world that we're in, and time didn't allow for that. But I think hopefully we'll can have a good discussion about some of that today. I guess, Dr. BOAH, I had one question. Have you and Dr. Hendricks looked at, and I hate to throw this out because it seems to be everywhere right now, but with looking into the future with new lab space, what are the possibilities of where AI can look at some of the diagnostic work that's being done at the lab now to maybe shrink the amount of square footage that's needed for actual bodies to be in the lab? If you follow my question.
I think I do with stuff that way. So as far as AI applications within the diagnostic realm and how all that plays out, there's a couple different areas that we've been looking at and investigating with our workflows and our structures and how that plays out. One of those is in the digital pathology realm of things. So I think that's been discussed and presented to the board previously, where we used some of our surplus funding from the HiPath event to purchase some sophisticated equipment that will allow our histology lab to take those flash slides of tissues that our pathologist would look at under a microscope and send them through a really highly advanced scanning system that's able to take a lot of scans and reads across the slide and digitize that image, where we're able to zoom in and up and change a little bit of what we're seeing with things that way. And that ties into a computer system where our pathologists are able to view the slides, see what the tissues look like, see the different color changes from the stains that have been applied to it. In one way, essentially replacing the microscope need and being able to do it from a computer screen rather than being at the microscope. With that, there's already work that has been done on the human medicine side of things to integrate AI into scanning the slides and identifying areas that need to be evaluated further. So that's one application that could be implemented into things, is to use that as a pre-screening tool, but it still does not replace the human. We still need that human to do that final diagnosis and confirm what the AI has flagged. It does speed up that process and shorten the time to go through and evaluate cases. What our researchers and faculty and pathologists have been looking at and working on with some of these companies that produce these different algorithms on the AI side is, how can we advance the evaluation of those slides? Can we use AI to go through and count mitotic figures? So those would be components that are indicators of potentially a cancerous event happening in the tissue and the cells that are going along with that. Measurements and different things that are very tedious and difficult to do on a microscope, that now we have this high quality digital scan that we can use the digital components to do measurements, counts, and estimations that go along with that, and could potentially open up a lot of further applications that play into it. So those are all potential AI applications. Doesn't really decrease the people per se, but it improves their workflow and would allow for higher throughput and some increased accuracy and some of the measurements and things that go along with that. Additionally, there are applications that we are looking at. So Dr. Rahul Nelly, the newest molecular section head that just started this past Monday, he comes to us from Iowa State and has a lot of experience with PCR, high throughput, and automation that goes along with that. So with his experience and interest areas, we're wanting to explore implementation of some of these higher throughput, use of some robotics to assist the technicians, that can expand our operational hours by the technicians doing the work that they need to do, but what can be turned over to the robotics to continue doing testing when the technicians are busy doing other things, or even overnight applications that go along with that. And a lot of that is going to rely on heavy algorithms and some AI usage to be able to expand upon those workflows to make everything play out. So those, I would say, have been the main two areas that we've entertained and investigated related to the utilization of AI in the diagnostic workforce.
If there is a new West Lafayette laboratory, would that new laboratory still be able to utilize the incinerator that
Yes.
has been recently, and then the walk-in cooler that is still a work in progress, will still be able to utilize those assets?
Right. So yeah, so we would still have access to those for our use. The new facility would have to have a cooler unit installed and in place in there, just because the carcasses would be on site and the transportation of a new unit is going to be moving around outside of the buildings. So for actual workflow usage, we would need to have a cooler in the new facility to be able to use. But yes, we would still retain access to that incinerator for incineration disposal. There would be a new and alternative method that's part of the plans for the new facility, which is going to be, it's a digester is what it's called. It's more of the alkaline hydrolysis process. That would be installed in the new facility. So that would be one method that we'd be able to utilize, but then also in the BSL-3 facilities, where we also need to look at wastewater disposal and handling appropriately. We're able to drain that water into the digester component, and that is able to sterilize the water and come out with an end product that's going to be safe for disposal and eliminate the pathogens that we're most concerned about with that BSL-3.
Okay. Thank you.
If we build a new facility versus renovate the other one, are we doubling the current square footage of the lot that we have now?
So we would be going from currently at 59,000 square feet is where the current building is, and then up to 94,000 square feet is what the new facility would be. So that would be gross square footage that goes along with that. So it's not quite doubling the gross square feet that goes along with it. Where we would see the improvement would be the assignable square footage, which would be the actual usable space that goes along with it. The model that they used is a 60% efficiency factor when they calculated and designed everything along. So in the new facility, we would have about 57,000 assignable square feet. We're currently in the current building, we only have 31,000 square feet that would be assignable. So that is an improved efficiency in the newer building with how the structure would be laid out and everything, and does get us really close to being essentially double the amount of usable square footage or assignable square feet that would play into that.
Other questions for Dr. Bowen? Okay. At this point, we've got some of our industry partners in the room. Do any of you have some questions, commentary, testimony?
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Josh Trinary with Indiana Pork Producers Association. Sometimes when your talking points are as fresh as today's headlines, you just have to carry your laptop around. So Denise, do you have I'm worried you're going to get the visual bends as we transition from ADDL's document to mine, but I'll pull it up here. It's, okay, so Dr. Bowen referenced this too, and the reason the square footage number there on the top chart for Indiana is different than what Dr. Bowen says, just because we roll geeky square footage and testing volume into that number. And all that the first chart is up there to demonstrate is just what Dr. Bowen said, that size and square footage is not a good indicator of testing throughput. There's more factors in play there. And then I also wanted to show in the Perkins and Will study, it's all right, I'm still, yeah. So I also want to show on that bottom chart there, just as we begin this conversation, that if you look at relatively recent projects in other states, Ohio and Iowa, you can, and I only put the phase 2 construction cost number there for Iowa just because it was the more recent number. You can see that the construction cost per square foot in the Perkins and Will proposal for Indiana is vastly different than what we know the real world construction cost numbers were in Ohio and Iowa. And so, okay, now you can. So I put this up here and then I'm going to kind of talk about how we arrived at this. Because speaking just for the pork industry now, we want a new main lab that can help future-proof this. You saw those testing volume numbers trickling up on Dr. Bowen's handout, and that's not even considering the fact that the industry is working toward a swine health improvement program as a codified USDA program that would be sort of our NP and IP, which will also increase testing volume additionally across the industry. So we know we need facilities to be able to accommodate that into the future. We also know that for the benefit of our livestock and dairy partners that we need a new Southern satellite lab. And so we're supportive of that too. But the problem with the Perkins and Will proposal is the lab just seems too big for our volume now and for what we see at Ohio doing in their 70,000 square feet. And it seems too expensive. And Purdue agrees. And so it puts us in an interesting position where you have this fully baked proposal for Perkins and Will where the lab looks too big and it looks like it costs too much. A lot of the political advantage that's gained from having a fully baked proposal like that Perkins and Will package is that typically with a capital ask like this, you'd have Purdue in lockstep with you and you would move forward jointly if that was a Purdue priority and you could use that proposal to point to as the thing that you need. We're not going to have any of that. And so what we were proposing that we replace that with is the ability to negotiate. If we can put a lump sum laboratory number into BOAH's budget, that gives us the ability to lobby the administration to leave it in the governor's budget. It gives us the ability to lobby the legislature for a fairly simplistic ask of just, hey, we want 2 labs. This lump sum number will get us there. This is what we think the state's portion of this should be. And then eventually we can start pitching it to Purdue saying, hopefully saying we've secured this funding. Now let's put a plan together knowing that we have this funding in hand and see what we can do for a Southern satellite lab and a new main lab. And so if you look at the construction costs numbers that were on that previous slide, the number we used was 1,150 square feet, just to be a little higher than what we saw out of Ohio and Iowa. And then the 70,000 to 75,000 square foot lab is just a number we came up with based on the fact that we know, I think it was Dr. Bowen that had said like 80% of Iowa State's total testing volume comes out of that 73,000 square foot facility. I think
That's one of their notations.
Yeah. So if you've got 80% of their tremendous amount of testing volume coming through 73,000 square feet, and then you see the testing volume that Ohio's saying they're doing out of 70,000 square feet, that's probably good enough for the right size for us, even with growth potential, not even considering the fact that what we would also be proposing is the additional square footage of a satellite lab. So we feel like that's a more reasonable number because you have to remember it's going to be the industry groups that are going to be out there lobbying mostly for this. And so it has to be something that we feel comfortable enough that we can justify before we spend the political capital to do it. And so if you look at a rough construction, just pure construction cost per square foot number of $1,150, and then those size ranges that we have on the screen here, that would put a lump sum ask for the total package of what we're looking at here for these 2 labs somewhere between 96 and 102 million just for the construction costs. What I am proposing to you is if we could get just a lump sum number and saying we want these 2 labs approved by this board today, then that gives us something we could work off of with the governor's office, with the legislature, and then eventually with Purdue. So that's what we're hoping to do today. So I hope you see fit to at least consider that.
So does the 75,000 square foot, does that include the BSL-3?
So again, all of the details and things, if we had a fully baked proposal, we would pitch a whole package with every single aspect and characteristic of the lab that we wanted. We don't have any of that, so we shouldn't do any of that. So all of that kind of thing should be on the table for the negotiation later. You find out what money you secure from the state, knowing you've secured some funding from the state, what other money can you find out there from, philanthropy or private partners? What else is out there? Once you know that, then figure out, okay, for what we have, this is our budget, what can we put into it? But to commit to say, hey, this lab's going to have a certain amount of BSL-3 space or whatever else, I don't think we're in a position to do that because we don't have a fully baked proposal. We're just trying to get funding to secure a project.
Josh, the southern satellite, the new southern, is we talked about a new northern. And like Dr. Marshall presented something about potentially
Right.
connecting university.
So
So
we
you're
have,
want to put another lab in southern Indiana?
what I'm saying is with this is we know that ET needs to be replaced. And we understand that particularly for the poultry and beef industries, ET is tremendously important. And so we are supportive of the idea that ET would get replaced. But as for the pork industry, my handlers have no interest in a Northeast lab. So I'm only proposing what the people that signed my check want me to propose here
Sure.
today.
Well, if you looked at the heat map, like last time that we had up there,
That's right.
Northeast Indiana is in, I wouldn't say desperate need of a lab, but it's where our livestock is in the state of Indiana.
That's right. And if our pork industry had interest in pitching that, we'd be pitching that today too.
Okay.
But it's just not, the interest just isn't there.
I might add a few things.
Oh, okay. You have a question?
Yeah, if you settle on a number to present and in the bargaining process, say, why don't you just renovate the lab instead of building a new one? Is that something you're willing to bargain down to, or are you dead set on it?
It's certainly something we'd be willing to, I mean, I'm only speaking for the pork industry here. I think that was be something we'd be willing to negotiate on. The reason why, at least in my mind, that's not a good possibility is just based on the alternative Perkins and Will proposal where the full renovation of the existing facility was more expensive than a new facility. That's all I was basing that on. Done.
Yeah, okay. Any more questions for Josh? Specific to the pork industry? We'll try and. All right,
Yeah,
Becky?
Sure, we've been working closely with pork, and I'm Becky Yonishnan, president of the Indiana State Poultry Association. So we had good conversation with our board of directors 2 weeks ago. And to the question about the Northern Lab, I put that to that group and really had very little interest in it. I think a lot of it, they've just been hit very hard by that incident. And we had a courier service that was going to West Lafayette. So I think,
They can work.
right, and that worked well. And so I think that took some of the pressure off. But at the Southern Lab, we do a lot of necropsies on turkeys. They're older, they're larger birds, and that's just a need. But the northern groups said to me, Maple Leaf said they do their own necropsies. And I heard a similar thing from MPS and Creighton, Calmaine. And so that, I was surprised too, that there wasn't more interest in that, but we did, have a direct discussion about the need for Northern Lab. All that said, we agreed that if other aspects of animal agriculture wanted a lab there, it's not like we would work against it. It just, in terms of our priority, that wasn't the highest. The Southern Indiana Lab is very key to certainly our turkey industry mostly, but our egg industry there is also there, and they are also interested in having additional capacity there, having that PCR, the ability to run PCR tests and be involved in in a disease incident response would be, and having that there would be really key. We also see great value to the rest of the animal agriculture, to be able to have that large, full-size necropsy floor there. I know Dr. Marsh has shared a number of times, found some interesting things down there at Kiki. People who may not bring their animal all the way to West Lafayette, that still managed to make it to Kiki. So that lab is key to poultry's support of the full project. We really want to see that part of it. We also want to see a new main lab. We want that lab, as best it can, to be standalone and be independent of reliance on other states. We've definitely had some very serious and long-running animal disease incidents, and we are very appreciative of everything the lab has done for us, and we know we ran them just to the absolute edge. And we weren't in 2 theaters at one time, and we weren't dealing with another animal agriculture disease incident. So I feel like we've seen how close it can get, and it's not comfortable, and we managed to survive it. But I think with having that experience and that foresight, the investment in a new main lab and a new southern lab, and as Josh shared, the numbers are high, the square footage seems a little high, sized to, and we're speaking for poultry, and then just in generally thinking of animal agriculture more broadly, that be appropriately sized for those industries in our state. So we're kind of looking to other states as examples. Any questions for me?
Just want to be clear that, so the transport of birds from the northeast part of the state to the West Lafayette Diagnostic Lab, that's been what you would say is a satisfactory process as far as the efficiency?
So during the disease incident, Board of Animal Health, and I had a staff member, and then eventually paid for and hired a private courier, which was not cheap, but provided a spot. Basically, if you got there by 8 a.m. with your samples, and nobody's sending in birds that were really just sending in swabs. So they would arrive at a common point at 8 a.m. and the driver would get the samples down to West Lafayette. They could have results back by late afternoon, and that worked very well. And we've done different forms of that for responses in different parts of the state. They certainly in 2016, the turkey samples were, couriered up to West Lafayette. And then we had people driving from Jay County when we were hit pretty hard in winter 2025, that part of the state. And that's been sufficient to support a disease incident. And I think for routine samples, they paid for shipping. The samples could just be shipped there. So, and ultimately, we talked about it's like, okay, yeah, it's a long drive from Middlebury to West Lafayette. It's probably at least 2 hours, 15 minutes. A lab in Huntington might cut an hour off of that, but just didn't feel like that was worth $20 million to cut an hour off here and there. So absent larger demand, just didn't see a need.
Any other questions for Becky and poultry industry specifically?
Thank you.
No. Thank you for that. Anyone else from the gallery? Thoughts? Questions?
I have a question for Dr. Marsh. I think the last meeting you said you were going to talk to the horse racing folks. Do they have an interest in advocating for this?
They did not speak specifically about this. So we talked about other topics, but they didn't have a position on the diagnostic lab.
I'm on the breed of development for quarter horses, but the quarter horses specifically do a lot of hair testing, and then you've got the drug testing for the standardized quarter horses. That was something, we have a redevelopment later in the week, and I know it'd be long-term, but we're having issues with industrial labs right now with their testing and samples. It's been a nightmare. So I do think that they would be willing to keep, that everything is preached to be Indiana ag, right? We want to keep everything in state as much as we can. So if that option's available, I think there would be a big push if they would offer it to do that drug testing here. So.
And Larry, to that point, Doctor, yes, we have had conversations about the potential of running post-race testing at the ADDL. So we've put together some data, some figures, and that could be accomplished. It takes some money on the front end to get the equipment, the certification under HISA, et cetera. So it takes some money to get that accomplished. So that conversation is taking place. It could be accomplished with the appropriate dollars and training and personnel to get that done. But as far as specific about the proposals of a new laboratory, et cetera, that wasn't part of the conversation. Yeah.
I was just kind of interested in how many advocates we'll have from the different commodity groups.
So, Larry, this is, I haven't been on the board forever, but there's been a market change in how this is done over the course of, the last 6 years, where all of this would have just been run through under Purdue's budgetary ask, and then that was usually either flatlined or decreased. Then Dr. Akey that did the analysis and report on the ADDL that really kind of got the ball rolling on some of these things, said, well, under statute, it's the Board of Animal Health that's supposed to, handle these budget asks to the state. And so, to quote him, he said in the executive summary from his report, it will take a concerted effort of all the parties, Purdue University, the Indiana Board of Animal Health, the animal industries, and the state to secure the resources and support that policy change at the ADDL is needed. And so that's why, we're all lucky enough to be here to get this once in a generation, and I'm be generous when I say that, ask to upgrade the lab facilities, for our state's veterinary industry. So I think I said at the last meeting that the ADDL was still bright and new and shiny when I showed up as an undergrad on campus back in the 90s, and knowing that there's not been a lot done to it since then, we think about the number of changes the world has seen in that time span, and we need to have our eyes on the future. I think that's been illustrated. I want to commend Dr. Bowen and Dr. Hendricks. They over the last few years have turned around what was a decrease. You look at the line at the number of lab submissions that were going to DDL, and it was going like this, and now they've turned that around and brought that back up in positive territory. So I'd like to think that we've started to make some of the structural changes that are setting the lab up for success in the future, and hopefully by that the animal agricultural industry. But Larry, I don't think it just needs to be the livestock in the equine section, but the number of tests that are done for companion animals now is increasing dramatically, and I'd like to think, Dr. Bowen, do either you or Dr. Hendricks have any figures off the top of your head as far as what the margin would be on the test for dogs, cats, etc.?
As far as the margin is higher than with livestock. We do utilize some of our testing from the companion animal to help subsidize some of the livestock testing in that manner. Test volume wise, as you mentioned, Chairman, the numbers have been increasing with that. Necropsy cases in West Lafayette, canines make up the largest number of necropsy cases that we do have come through with that. You have a higher fee for necropsy than livestock. offset some of those costs because it is a very expensive procedure to go along with that. And we continue to increase our test offering for infectious disease diagnostics, as well as receiving biopsy cases for tumors and other types of masses from small animals, quite a large number.
Larry,
So the dog and cat commodity groups, or the.
yeah. But yes, I guess I'm not saying that they've got the same financial stake in this, but they are definitely stakeholders in this. But yes, it is more of a lift than the constituent groups that are represented on this board would have had to have done 6 to 8 years ago. But in my opinion, this is an essential service that the state should provide, and that it should be funded at a level requisite to what its contribution to the state's economy is. And I think in a lot of the supporting information that's been sent out, it shows what the return is on a dollar that's been invested in the ADDL. It returns back to the state's economy. I want to make sure that we've got a good discussion on this today, because as we've just said, it's going to be a heavier. Once we pass something out of this board, it's going to be a heavier and concerted lift. And for that standpoint, I'd sure love to be able to say that we've reached consensus, and what we have come out of here today is a unanimous vote in support of something. But I don't want to steer. I want good discussion. Steer. Okay. Yes. Steve.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So I did want to just say a few words on behalf of the dairy industry. Certainly, we want to be strong partners with other livestock groups, and we believe that if we truly understand that livestock is important to our rural communities and the economic development there, that we need supporting services to support the industry as a whole. I feel, however, that dairy is a little bit different. Most of probably the samples that come off dairy farms are just being dictated by the farm veterinarian. And I think it will take a little bit of effort to kind of build back, if you want to say that business with our local large animal vets, to bring some of those diagnostic needs back to Indiana. It's not that the dairy industry doesn't use diagnostic services, but milk samples sometimes are handled by our milk cooperatives. Lungs and some post-mortem, but probably not as much post-mortem as maybe what beef cattle would use. I don't know on that end, but we want to be supportive of this. And as Josh, his presentation on finding cost-effective ways to make this happen, I think would be good for the Indiana livestock industry and going forward. So again, feel like the dairy industry is a little bit different animal than poultry and pork. It's not that we don't need the services, but the point of contact on getting dairy more supportive of a lab it really comes from the veterinarians themselves.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate your comments.
I think since the Dr. Akey's report in 2022, pointed out a lot of deficiencies, and I think the ADDL, the state, and we all have, everybody's made conscious efforts towards that in terms of labor dollars, labor rates, all that, get a good staff on hand. Some of the fixed assets that we needed, the LIMS system. discussed the incinerator, the walk-in cooler. You know, now it's to the point, I think, that now we just need brick and mortar. The brick and mortar. Because we can do all that and get everything in line in terms of people, but if they don't have facilities to work with, and there's a lot of challenges within the main lab. We know the challenges down in Kiki lab. You know, we squeak by with, you know, getting certifications and all that. So I think now's the time we need to do something different.
I don't know who to address this to or who to ask it to, but do we have any examples of current turnaround time from certain tests that you guys have to take versus, you know, maybe we're sending them to Iowa or whatever, compared to what the turnaround times on these tests might be if we were able to do them right here in Lafayette?
As far as tests that we're sending out to other labs?
The different industries are taking. I mean, are they taking a week to get them back? Are they taking 3 days to get the results back?
Right, so what plays into some of that is partially going to be your shipping time that goes along with that. So depending on when your sample is collected and when you get it to the lab. Definitely overnight shipping provides a huge convenience as far as flexibility goes to getting samples anywhere in the country, as long as you're willing to pay that price to get those samples that get there. With that, one of the biggest areas that folks are sending out with some of these samples is for PCR testing. We also are providing same-day results on those PCR tests and things that way. With that, though, where the benefit to overcome that overnight shipping is if you collect your sample in the morning and you're within an hour, 2 hour drive of the lab and you want to drive that sample to the laboratory for us to go ahead and run that sample, as long as we've got it by 11 a.m., we can easily crank out a same day result for that producer and get those results, which in that point in time, now you have your results 24 hours earlier than if you overnight ship it to another state for their laboratory to perform that test. So that give you kind of the insight you're looking for?
Yeah, I'm just trying to see the different benefits that as different industries might be able to attain from getting these results much sooner versus waiting on results to come in so that we can make decisions on whether we need to, you know, recall or depop. So,
Brad, one of the, you know, I've slept a few times since, you know, the Hickey report initially came out. But a lot of the issues were with how easy it is to make the submissions and then get the results back. And the improvement of the LIMS system was going to go, you know, a long way to cleaning up time on the front end and on the back end for getting, you know, your results back. And if I'm erroneous in what I'm saying, that somebody can point that out to me, but, you know, you'd be able to, you know, the turnaround time of it on the tests, you know, isn't going to be that much different between, say, Purdue and another lab. It's just getting that information back to the submitting veterinarian or the owner.
So yeah, that user experience with the LIMS goes a long way, and the flexibility of having mobile interfaces where you're able to access things from a phone or a tablet while you're out in the field to get your results off of that versus waiting for an email to come through, having that instant access, instant gratification definitely is something people really are excited about and getting that way. Additionally, what plays into it also is the digital submission component of it, where the veterinarians producers will be able to utilize a digital submission through their portal rather than having to fill out a paper submission. Lots of benefits on the producer side of that, from being able to essentially clone a previous, if you're doing weekly surveillance, just go back to last week, clone it over, update the dates, a couple things, done. As opposed to having to fill out a new paper form. On our end, it definitely cuts down on the amount of time because now all that data is entered. We just need to ensure for completeness, everything's there, documented the way we need to, and everything looks accurate for what the submitter has completed on there, as opposed to us having to go through and hand key that written out information into a computer system where on these weekly submissions, we're having to duplicate that workflow and process. So that does, we try to not let that slow down the intake and the testing portion of it, and we work on that while the test is happening. But there is a bottleneck always in that receiving aspect of things and getting things distributed out to the lab. So with a modern LIMS system and the abilities that will be afforded with that, we should be able to get samples to labs on a quicker pace for them to get started on their workflows and the testing procedures, which could result in earlier results getting out to some of those folks.
Have we updated the LIMS system yet, or is that still a part of?
It's in progress. We're underway with that. The current goal is for that to be ready in May of 27. Hopefully we don't experience setbacks, but I think we were all prepared that most things run into some delays and setbacks that go along with that. I think our goal is to get it out as quickly as possible. But also at the same time, we want to make sure it's field tested. So there are some key clients, veterinarians and producer groups that we would like to work with to have them run it in parallel to the current system, just to make sure everything is ready to go, that we have a successful launch when we pull the trigger and go forward with everybody.
And I think, and Dr. Bowman can correct me, but so I'll go back to when the Indiana Swine Veterinarians you met as a group here in Indianapolis, separate from the pork producers meeting, and it was a December meeting that we did annually. And I can remember at that time, Dr. Thacker came in and did an update of the diagnostic lab. And he was asked a question at that time. And the question was, what did he see as the main focus of the diagnostic lab at the time? And his answer was to train pathologists. And I remember on that day, Dr. Thacker got yelled at because there were some people in the room that had a problem with that response. I would like to believe that the lab has turned a corner as far as that's concerned. That the lab is more of a service lab as opposed to something that's there just to train pathologists. But Dr. Thacker was the director at the time, and that was his response. And I think whatever support that they need, they should receive. I mean, this lab has a big job as far as servicing the agricultural industries in this state, and I think it's deserving of whatever support that we can give it. But I do believe that the mindset as far as what the purpose of that lab has changed, and it's more of serving the folks in the state that need it, as opposed to training particular individuals in a specialty.
Dr. Marsh?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a few comments. I'm Brett Marsh at Purdue, and I appreciate all the comments that have been made to this point. I also appreciate the fact that the Board of Animal Health would even take it on, because the routing, as David mentioned before, was an entirely different pattern. The Purdue ADDL would prepare a budget. By law, it would come to this board. I've never seen one turned down, thankfully. Then we go back to Purdue to be part of Purdue's bigger ask. And that routing just didn't work over the years. And so ADDL languished, frankly. And so I appreciate the fact we wouldn't be talking about the LIMS that's coming in place. We wouldn't have been talking about the replacement of the incinerator cooler, because that came through this board. The adjustments that you approved at your last meeting, getting ready for the next biennium. I appreciate the fact also that these industries that we're dealing with continue to change and grow. I can remember when I sat around this table, that was one of the things that was most compelling to me, because if you didn't have growing and robust industries, there's no reason to have a conversation at all, because they boxed up and gone somewhere else. We have a huge advantage in this state with the sectors that we have, whether it's the racing industry, with the equine and all the pleasure horses, et cetera. I've been involved in the Shelbyville discussions, what's going on in the equine industry, and there's a lot happening in that space. You have 70% of the households in Indiana own a pet. We're the highest in the Midwest. We already know our ranking in animal agriculture commodities. We rank in the top 5 amenities, as I mentioned in the last meeting, and we're the smallest state geographically west of the Appalachian Mountains. So how has that happened in a state our size? I have no idea. There's a lot of factors that go into that in order to make that successful. So I appreciate the fact that you're considering, and you've got a proposal on the table here that's come from pork and poultry. Again, as I mentioned at our last meeting, Purdue University has other capital projects that are on their roster. I've been charged with getting the class to 120 students, and so that's been the charge of the college, but this is an important consideration. I was in the laboratory yesterday and taking a tour out of some of these areas. And as David's mentioned, it was dedicated in 1991, so it's 35 years old this year. A lot of technology has changed. There have been renovations that have taken place in the laboratory. And so I think it is appropriate that we take a look at it. It's a whole new version. If it hadn't been for the Perkins and Will study, we wouldn't be talking, we wouldn't have anything to really look to. And I appreciate the fact that the 22 study that was done by Bruce Akey was significant as well. I've read that report several times. I think it's about 35 pages, but I think it's on page 27 that it says in there that we have a second-class lab. Plain and simple. We have a second-class lab. And with all the things that we mentioned that are going on in our state, it's incumbent upon us to take care of that, it seems to me. Yeah, we can ship them all to Iowa, but if they have a fire at that lab or they have an emergency of some kind, there needs to be some redundancy in the system that you likely have in your business practices as well. You have a generator when the electricity goes out or whatever, right? And so I think we have a similar duty to make sure that we're properly resourced. So I appreciate the careful consideration. I know there was a lot of material given to you at the last board meeting. I appreciate the fact that the board has reconvened. You folks have come from your business and practices, et cetera, to come in and to deliberate one more time. But it is time for a change. We're going to have to do something in order to support the diagnostic services we have in the state. I appreciate the fact that the chairman also pointed out the work of Dr. Hendricks and Dr. Bullen, because it is dramatically different. It wasn't too many years ago, about 170,000 tests a year. And now we've seen a dramatic increase in that and begin to see a shift where people are coming back to the laboratory. And I understand there's been a lot of IPAT testing, but that aside, there's been a lot of fundamental testing that's been increased and improved. Services will improve. Brad, your question's a good one. The money came through to support the LIMS system, that laboratory information management system. We've been frustrated because we had to change vendors. We started down one path and had to redirect and had delayed us. But I think that will be a major factor for us as well. New, old laboratory, wherever we are, the ability to communicate with our customers is going to be extremely important. So thanks for your deliberations here today. I appreciate it very much. I think it is a pivotal time for our state when it comes to diagnostic services. Again, we could box them off, send them all somewhere else. The reality is that when you get down to the challenges that are going on now at the farm gate out there, we need to have these diagnostic services for our citizens. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Marsh. Any questions for Dr. Marsh?
I have one, and I'm certainly not here to disagree with the poultry and swine industry. But you had mentioned last time about a northern lab, or talked a little bit about it. If you look at the heat map, in which I know we all have saw that, I think maybe a lot of people's minds, if you didn't ever have a lab in the state of Indiana, where would you put a lab at compared to where the livestock is? I think people would throw an arrow and put it up in the northern part of the state. And I'm certainly, I mean, I get it. You guys asked your people. For me, I have a hard time wrapping my head around that there wouldn't be a lot of benefit for a satellite lab in the northern part of the state of Indiana. And have you done any follow up or talked to any of those universities at all?
I haven't had any additional conversation with them. No.
Sure.
But
Can I add to that? You also mentioned if there would be a fire in the lab, and if we go and put all our eggs in this one basket in West Lafayette, are we better off to have a little bit of redundancy and build that second lab in northern Indiana?
Well, it could be in northeast Indiana. I think there is increased capacity with the change at Hickey also. Because what we're proposing down there is different than what we have currently. It'll have a broader range of services. For example, we're not running PCR for high path down there, and that would be one of the proposals here. So again, even within our state, Brad, I think there's making sure that we have some redundancy in the system. We do see the potential coming down the pipeline, as Josh has mentioned, with some of the new test requirements that may come with PED or whatever under the SHIP program, so being prepared for that. Larry, we talked about in the last meeting, the diagnostic and post-race testing with the horse industry. We've also talked about consumer testing that currently goes to the Department of Health, whether it's for meat inspection or dairy products inspection. So those are all possibilities as well.
Brad, and Keith, to your points, I hope that it's not the board 35 years from now that's waiting to have this same discussion about making sure that the industry and the testing capacity is funded appropriately. I'd like to think that that's changed. You know, I've heard it described that we in ag have been Indiana nice for too long, and you make do with what you're given as opposed to asking for what you really need. If that makes sense. So, you know, well, I personally am not opposed to, you know, is there the need for that lab in the northeast quadrant of the state with some sort of redundancy and some level of testing capacity up there? If it doesn't have a champion that's ready to go to bat for it in this biennium, is it something we need to include in an ask?
Good, Gary, could you talk about the process a little bit? So you have to submit a number to the budget agency and then they review it and go, how does it, if we change this and we submit just a dollar amount, it's not necessarily attached to a specific proposal, like Josh was talking about, how does that affect your?
By close of business next Tuesday, I have to submit everything. Including for the Board of Animal Health and for the requests, operating and capital projects. And so for each of those items, any change packages, and just for the capital projects, you have to submit basically a detailed explanation, detailed information, and the number. So yeah, I don't know that there's any way to submit a range or just a number, so they will have to have additional information with it. But you know, obviously we can submit what we have. And I've been thinking about how to do that as I'm listening to all this. But, and so, you know, obviously we can't submit what we don't have, but we do have a report for a project that was maybe a little bigger than what the ask would be, but that's kind of the base that we're working from. And so, you know, we could put that together with an explanation, and, you know, that gets it into the system. So essentially, if the board were to approve something today, then I'll figure out a way to describe that in the way that they want things described, putting that into the process, and that'll get it in terms of in the state budget agencies, that process to come up with this budget. So that's our current timeline. And obviously, and again, as it's been discussed, lots of opportunities outside of that to talk about it and so forth. Obviously, I can only submit what information we have.
And then if, then it's up to the governor to decide if he wants to include that in his budget that he presents to the legislature.
Yes, and a couple other things that will go on is we will have an opportunity, we being the agency, Dr. Shipman and I, to talk to our secretary for the vertical, energy and natural resource verticals, Secretary Jaworski. And then also we will have a meeting with the budget agency. And the budget director will be there, probably will be. where we go over, I was asked. Including this, just question, we want to give them the pitch, ask questions. The capital folks are different than the other folks down at the budget agency, so we talk.
So if the governor decides not to include it, then that precludes you from really advocating during the
It
session.
would not be, I mean, yeah, it would not be, I mean, BOAH could answer questions, that sort of thing, but yeah, and even if it is included, we wouldn't necessarily be lobbying for it, if you will. We're available to ask questions, answer questions, if you need information, we'll try to get it, that sort of thing.
So the main advocates would fall to you guys.
Yeah, Larry, kind of the way I see this, if we find a number that we can agree on and approve, folks in the back, we'll start trying to pull levers with the governor's office again to make sure that this is included in the governor's budget that's sent up, and then that's one step. Then after that, start working with two trustees, and then supporting the members of the House Ways and Means and Senate Tax and Fiscal committees. We'll see who on the Senate side, who any of those people are here. That's still up for some debate. And then try and get them to again at that point in time highlight the financial impact of the livestock and equine industry, poultry industries on the state budget or on the state's economy, and try and make sure that we've got the resources we need to continue to grow those segments. I didn't say it was going to be easy.
I'd like to make a motion.
Ty, go ahead.
To make a motion that I move to approve a budget of approximately $100 million for a new laboratory, new Southern Indiana laboratory.
Second.
All right. Virgil Bremer, second. So we've got a motion that's been made and seconded to approve a $100 million capital improvement budget for a new main laboratory, location to be determined, and a southern satellite laboratory, location to be determined. Do I have any discussion on the motion?
I ask a question?
Yes, Dr. Hall.
So say we go through and we approve the 100 million, and then they actually go through and they say that's actually not enough with new equipment, whatever else, what happens then?
Well, if we can get the appropriators to appropriate more money, then the way I see it with this number, there are going to be, it's not going to mean everything for every one lab. There will be choices, hard choices that will have to be made, either shrinking square footage, shrinking certain capacities with equipment. So I would say then if you're appropriated more, then you're going back in the direction of what was laid out in the Perkins and Will study. But at that point in time, we'll have to have discussions with, again, stakeholders, Purdue. What are we going to be able to get this money? Does anybody else have a different read on that?
I think, you're just in negotiations, basically.
Yeah, am I allowed to make a few comments?
Certainly.
Okay, so we've had a slight chance to digest some of this more than what you all have as far as an alternate proposal. So just want to lay out a few other components for you. The numbers we've been talking about, they definitely seem high with where things are at. One thing to make you aware of is the figures that we have in our study and have been presented are in $2028. So the money has been escalated up to project what cost would cost in 2028 to go along with that. With that said, the roughly 70 million or the roughly $1,000 square foot figure that Ohio has and everything, that was a 2024 bid pricing that went along with it. Iowa was a 2024 bid pricing. Cornell is in the process. They have a 2026 bid price of $1,600 a square foot for their laboratory in New York. Turlock in California has a 2023 bid of $1,300 per square foot. And then Pennsylvania for their new lab at Penn State is $1,350 a square foot with a 2026 price. So I think we're all aware price of construction has greatly increased in the post-COVID era of things that way. So just to kind of set how some of those numbers do, I still think they're very high with where they are, but forecasting what steel and everything else is going to be, and whenever this actually comes to be fruition, just something to have into consideration as far as some benchmarks that go along with that. And as the chairman mentioned with things, there will have to be a lot of discussion as far as what priorities are in reducing either everything as a scaled down model, roughly 26%, everything would have to come down from what was initially validated and established in the original plan, determining which services to exclude and remove altogether, and then likely having to scale down things too. So determining what those factors are. It's very impressive with Iowa's 80% that they're able to do at roughly the same size of a building with everything, but that's one of their buildings. They have a second building. So it kind of plays into the other charges and services that us having that dual appointment of a university and a state diagnostic lab of it. If we're only going to be, which thank you for your acknowledgement, recognition of our service effort, because we definitely have put our blood, sweat, and tears and given up a lot to get the lab to where it's at and to give people their results and the turnarounds to make it there. So we are very invested in the service component of it, but being part of the university, we also have that educational part of it. So education and research also takes space. There's lots of components to weigh, and I just wanted to put that back to everybody's thoughts as we go forward with those final discussions. Thank you.
One other question. So Gary, if we submit the 100 million, say that comes back and gets approved and it's part of the governor's budget, and who does it fall to then to move forward and figure out what can you do with $100 million? Is that Purdue, or is that this board, or who would actually say, let's build?
If the General Assembly appropriated, then it would be, in terms of the money part, the money would be available to Board of Animal Health that we would work with Purdue, but the project would be a Purdue building project. In other words, this board would not have any responsibility for hiring architects, determining the final plan, approving the final plan, building it, hiring, any of that.
So they would decide what they can do with 100 million. Whether it's how much goes to SciPac, how much to Purdue, and all.
Yeah, I mean, it would be, and then in terms, and again, this is to me, I think maybe to everybody in terms of how this board exactly would interact with that, but I presume that there would be additional presentations to this board. Okay, here's the new plan. This would, that looks like maybe an opportunity. I don't know if it would be a formal approval.
Can you guys live with that if that's up to Purdue?
Oh, yeah, I think that's, but it's clearly a shared role, in my view. To Gary's point, the construction, the capital, and eventually to build a structure on the Purdue campus or anywhere else, Purdue would be heavily involved. But clearly with the board's interface, we want to make sure that we satisfy the needs of the industry in whatever gets built. So I think it's incumbent upon on us at Purdue to make sure that we're working in concert with the industry.
So it could come back to this body to whatever compromises need to be made from the total amount down to the 100 million or whatever the number winds up being.
Yeah, and we had the good fortune to be invited to this board on a quarterly basis, and so we'll continue to provide those reports and updates.
And to clarify, you're just asking us to vote on a dollar amount to be used towards the new lab, whether it's decided to be at Purdue and Hickey, or we put a lab in every county in the state. You're just asking us to vote on a dollar amount
Yes.
to approve.
Yeah, the motion is for the board to approve a request in the budget process for $100 million for a new main lab at a new Southern Indiana.
So if we all vote in agreement on that, that's the only two places that money can be spent.
Well, I think the motion was not geographic specific, if I'm right.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
New main lab, new
South.
down south.
Southern Indiana specific, but Southern.
Based upon what industry has said that they're willing to support, in my experience with these things, it's good not to start out too prescriptive in the beginning, and then we can, yes.
And Dr. Bowen, can you comment on the one page that you presented under option 2, as far as facility investment option?
So with that, that would be more of, in a way, this kind of open number of $20 million that we had designated towards renovations at West Lafayette, or the main lab, plus the construction of the proposed $21 million project for the Southern Indiana Laboratory. So that's where that option comes from. The 20 million in West Lafayette would have to be evaluated with the architects to go through and identify the key areas for which renovations would need to occur and happen. At this point in time, we don't have that plan in place. It would be something that would have to be done, but we would have to try and evaluate all of the needs and then determine how to prioritize those needs and how we could spend it out in that $20 million per year.
And the reason I ask is, you came prepared to rescind the motion to support the $140 million construction of a new lab, but I did have the opportunity to go down to the Hickey lab as a member of the University's ICUT, and we got a tour of that facility, and I would hope that for whatever it is we do here today, that we can at least address concerns at both labs, but specifically the Hickey lab, because they do a lot of work there, and that place just does not look like it's suitable for the amount of work that they're doing there.
Also, having seen it, I'll second that.
And at the same time, realizing that there need to be some improvements at the West Lafayette lab. If we're in a position where it's not likely that the university would get behind what is supporting a larger project or what have you, certainly something that would continue to make improvements in the lab, ultimately with getting to a point where that lab can then be replaced. And I remember the large the new hospital was a 20-year process. It just was. The need was established long ago, but it just took that long. And so I think that Hickey lab certainly needs some improving. But same time, at least making sure that the needs of the West Lafayette lab are being addressed until we can get to a point where we can have what is a new facility.
So is the university counting on the old ADDL to help with the anatomy lab and everything else? Cause like, I graduated at 19, there ain't no way you're fitting more kids in there. So,
That's a fair assessment. That's correct.
yeah.
The anatomy lab discussion, not to derail this, but yes, we've been charged to take the class to 120 students. The anatomy lab is the original lab that was built in 1959 for 50 to 60 students. We've all been through there, those of us in the program. So we shoehorn in about 89 now, so it's going to take a different look. One of the proposals was if a new laboratory is built, the postmortem floor could be used for an anatomy lab. As a rail system, you can do the ponies in the second semester, all those sorts of things. So there's been no determination that that would be the next step, but if indeed a laboratory is built, then that area could be used for the anatomy.
But there's no place in the new hospital that they're like, well, if we have it, so, I mean, there's not space for it.
One of the things, and again, I don't mean to derail it, because that's a whole separate, but the hospitals were built, and frankly, a lot of people said, okay, we fixed the veterinary college. But that's the whole clinical year. That's your 4th year of a 4-year program. So those first 3 years, when you're doing anatomy and the DSEC labs and all the rest, that's in the original structure. So that's one of our challenges to figure out. So how do we accommodate those additional students, which is nearly a 50% increase, the largest increase ever in the number of students. The other opportunity we're looking at is Indianapolis, Purdue University's Indianapolis campus, and also just south of there, the Elanco campus. So we're looking there at possibilities. Maybe it's a 2+2 program where we start students the first couple of years in Indianapolis and then matriculate to West Lafayette. But then we still have the junior surgery areas. You're familiar with those. They're going to be tight. So that's all part of the discussion. The reason this came up as related to the lab is the potential of using the current postmortem floor for the anatomy lab.
And Franklin probably has more to comment, but like the couple people I talked to said there's a big reason they're not getting as many maybe professors or people in is because of the lack of the BSL-3 research capabilities, like when they're trying to get new faculty, et cetera. So if we approve a new one, will the old building, if we utilize that for research space, et cetera, will it have those capabilities for trying to get more clinicians, et cetera, to come?
Well, the Perkins and Will study included the BSL-3 diagnostic space. One of the issues that we're having in recruiting faculty, for example, is BSL-3 space for, say, testing high-path AI in birds. We don't have that space currently. So that's one of the issues that we're taking a look at as well, which is really a space where you can bring birds in and challenge them with these viruses. Now that we do not have. And that, correct me if I'm wrong, would not be accomplished in the plan that we have here. So there are 2 different pieces to that, at least 2 different pieces with the BSL-3 discussion.
I would just feel more comfortable like creating a whole new one with everything if that's going to be repurposed, because it's going to be a need of the vet school for the students. Because I don't know how you build, and the anatomy labs on the 2nd floor and everything else. I mean, it's not like it can be easily repurposed.
Yeah, the first floor option would be preferable. I asked the question when it was built in 59, I said, what if we put all this anatomy lab on the 2nd floor? Because everything's elevators, all this sort of business. And it was actually for air handling and for ventilation on the 2nd floor. So presumably you get more circulation if you open the windows and all this sort of thing. Well, that was 1959.
Any other questions? Discussion?
Do we ask bigger? Like, that's my question. Like, is it better to ask for more and then be able to negotiate, et cetera, than to just stake at the 100 and then expect that?
I think from what I've heard, the discussions around the figure that Ty put out there was what is easily defensible and still moves the ball forward. And again, I'm going to have a robust discussion. because at some point it will fall back upon our constituent organizations, representatives of, be, carry it forward if, again, we get it, first step in the governor's budget, and then after that, talk to the people in Ways and Means and Tax and Fiscal committees. So, I don't want to be in a position, well, I said I don't want it to be 35 years before the next board is having to come make a large ask for capital. I don't think that appropriators will want to see us back every 4 years with another big ask, but I could be wrong.
From my understanding, they don't like us saying we need 5 million this year for this biennium, and another 5 million. Kind of feedback is, let's get this done. But with that said, with what Iowa State did, and Ohio State, look at it on a square footage basis, we could put a bigger ask, but if it gets roadblocked, then it's roadblocked, at least this, hopefully this would get the ball rolling.
We've got a motion that's been made and seconded on the table. Is there more discussion or any talk of amending said motion? Yeah, if you would. Gary will read.
Make sure I got this right. So, the motion is to approve a BOAH 2028, 2029 biennium budget capital request of $100 million for a new ADDL main lab and new satellite lab in Southern Indiana.
I think I said approximate 100 million.
That's all right. I don't think I can enter an approximation system.
I was wondering about that.
They want numbers.
Google
I don't think I can enter a range.
Do we want to say that the 100 million goes to a new lab or just the main lab? Matter if it's a renovation versus a new?
I have in their new main lab and new Southern Indiana.
I think the Southern Indiana definitely should be.
I was just basing off of the cost of renovating the current ADDL would be more than building new.
Right. Yeah, I'm assuming, Ty, you're going from the standpoint that you can get more, buy more for your dollar if it's new construction as opposed to renovation.
Wanted to amend your motion, we could say for a new or renovated ADDL main lab.
I want to go with new.
Again, this would not be the final word of what the project actually is.
Right.
This is just-
Yeah, the only question I have is it shading it too much? I don't know that one. If we're asking and we're trying to build a state-of-the-art lab moving forward, are we trying to cut corners too much? I don't, I'm not in the business of building labs.
I think it goes with what Dave was saying, it's got to be defensible. I think we've got a lot of people who crunch the numbers and just trying to be represented to our peers in other states.
Sure.
And
Based on what Dr. Bowen threw out as far as, the construction costs, I'm not even gonna consider what Cornell did. That's New York. They're a totally different animal. But with what he said about the cost at Penn State, you could say, another $200 per square foot, potentially, but
What was Penn State's?
it was around 1360. 1350. So, I'll leave that everyone's consideration.
But what we have on the table now would not, means the lab couldn't move up to what would be recognized as a tier 1 lab. I assume that wouldn't be enough to incorporate.
That's gonna play into that discussion of how that, whatever the final dollar amount that the state would approve on it, and then determining what the priorities and specific lab features are of the facility. So when you come back with that dollar amount, the key takeaway is everybody wants a new geeky lab. If the numbers hold true to what we've been provided, of that 100 million, 21 million of it's going to go to Southern Indiana. So it's going to leave roughly $80 million to build a new lab in Northern Indiana, or in West Lafayette, sorry, for what that would be. So if you work backwards from there again, the 1350 was 2026 pricing. The 1,000 for Ohio was 2024 pricing. So if you want to use those as a comparison, that's 2 years and $350 a square foot increase. Also 2 different states that goes to it. So at this point in time, we're escalating it to 2028 pricing to try and when would this actually break ground and get started and lock in with everything. So what would the number be there? That's the unknown.
And we were proposing how many square feet for Purdue? The ADDL?
Well, so the original that we brought forward for a new is roughly 94,000 square feet. Yeah, if you've got your calculator and you want to do 80,000 divided by 1350, not to say that that's exactly how it would play out, but then that would give you an idea.
Dr. Ragland.
I'm not used to typing in that many zeros.
Yeah. You know, again, I said, generally, I don't like to be too prescriptive at this stage of the game, but if you wanted to amend the motion saying to take the main lab to null level 1
that would limit you to 50
capabilities to kind of enshrine that, knowing that square footage may have to come in just a little bit, but that would be a consideration.
Oh, but I guess then the question becomes, well, what do you sacrifice as far as potential lab space and services?
Sounds like when I went car shopping with my wife.
What do we have in there that is costing that much more than the other labs that are built?
DSL3 level facility. It's all about containment, and so, yeah, I mean,
So the other labs that you showed us did not have that?
So if we're using Ohio and Iowa as the comparison markers of both of those, they both are going to have DSL3 laboratory space that would go into them. I don't know for Iowa whether that's in their phase 1 building or phase 2. Did they disclose that to you guys?
I don't remember what that was, Rogers email.
Okay. I can't imagine that that's in their phase 2 to be as efficient as what they were using for that figure, because that is the big expensive part. The one component that we had in our schematic that neither the other two have, definitely Iowa did not, was the BSL3 convertible necropsy space. So to have necropsy space that could operate at that BSL3 level to do necropsies on animals of high consequence diseases or are extreme zoonotic type cases to provide that additional containment and safety procedures. So that would be one of the distinguishing components that would be something that would add towards that price component as a higher price per square foot type thing. For all these other labs, I don't have that information in front of me to know who all has BSL3 necropsy space in comparison to it. That is one of the features that Michigan State has in their laboratory. I don't know whether Ohio has that in theirs or not.
So earlier I thought you mentioned, that Ohio and Iowa State had 70 to 75,000 square feet of lab space. At the 1350 per square foot puts us at 94 million.
So Penn State is the 1350.
I'm just
Ohio is around 100, or sorry, is around $1,000 per square foot with their figure.
Yeah, I'm just using the 1350 as some kind of
Okay.
budgetary
Oh,
number.
okay, as
But their lab sizes were 70 to 75,000 square feet.
Right.
Correct?
Which, and I guess the clarifier there for Iowa is Iowa built 2 buildings.
Okay.
So that's their phase 2, their second building, that they're running the large volume of the actual testing services through the second building. That they built a first building, and they don't know what all services they have divided between the 2 facilities.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is if we were going to build a lab at the same square foot size as Iowa and Ohio, then at using the 1350 per square foot price that Penn State had, then we would need at least $94.5 million to build that same size facility. And budgeting 100 and taking 20 out for the Southern Indiana lab only leaves us at 80. So
That puts us about 118 million,
if,
119 rounded up.
yeah.
Brad, willing to take
Amendments
to the motion.
Yeah, I will.
All right, so which is it, since apparently Gary can't do approximate, is it 118 or 119?
I'd say maybe 120.
120, all right. Brad's made a motion to amend motion. Floor, it's probably big enough, I don't, do you want to consider that a friendly amendment, Gary? Parliamentary. Okay, well, yeah, could I get,
I'll second.
all right. After. All those in favor of amending the, we will do a roll call vote, but all those in favor of amending Ty's motion from $100 million to $120 million for new main lab, capital expense for a new main lab and new Southern Indiana satellite lab.
Dr. Armstrong,
Aye.
Keith Beer,
Aye.
Virgil Bremer,
Aye.
Brad Fisher,
Aye.
Dr. Hafner, Dr. Hall,
Aye.
Dr. Hartwell,
Aye.
Ty Harder,
Aye.
Larry Hopkins.
Aye.
Dr. Ragland,
Aye.
and Dave Barton.
Aye. Right, any more discussion on the motion as amended? If not, I guess we'll call the question. Vote on the motion as amended.
Again, the motion is to approve a BOAH 2020-2029 biennial budget capital request for the AVL of $20 million for a new AVL main lab and satellite lab. So, Dr. Armstrong,
Aye.
Keith Beer,
Aye.
Virgil Bremer,
Aye.
Brad Fisher,
Aye.
Dr. Hafner, Dr. Hall,
Aye.
Dr. Hartwell,
Aye.
Ty Harder,
Aye.
Larry Hopkins,
Aye.
Dr. Ragland,
Aye.
and Dave Barton.
Aye. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for that. That was I know, a heavy lift, but I appreciate the thoughtful discussion from everybody. It's important that we get this right. You know, as was mentioned earlier, since this is a special meeting, we don't have lunch sponsored today, so we can do things one of two ways. We can take a 5-minute break for restroom and then start back up, or we can power through. What's the will of this?
What's left on the agenda?
Well,
It's all about the budget.
I don't know what that translates to time, so,
30 to 60 minutes.
no. I'll start to take back a break.
okay, well, we will break for 5 minutes for biological necessity. Yeah, Virgil's still on. We're coming back live, everybody. All right, continuing with the agenda, the agency update. Gary?
Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit more. I know at the last meeting, we started talking about personnel, and we're going through a process of kind of assessing the agency in its entirety, and division by division, for a number of reasons. Part of that is our experience with high-path AI, we talked about that, 25 and 26. That experience really stretched us beyond our capacity, really as an agency, across the one division in an area. But then also as a part of the biennial budget process, I think I mentioned last meeting, we are creating or have created or working with state personnel to create a strategic workforce assessment, which is feeding into the budget process. And so that the agency's contribution to that is now down with state personnel. I think they're going to do the final version of that, and then that'll be routed into the budget process somehow. So as a part of all that, we're looking at, okay, what do we need to do different with our personnel? And so the need for some additional support with avian health is clear. And so some things we're doing prior to the budget process, these are in process now, is that we're going to take the only two vacant positions in the agency. And we've reclassified those, and those are now posted. So we're currently recruiting for an avian health veterinarian. And so we think that'll add some capacity to our avian health team. But we're also aware that Dr. Kopp, who's been in the agency for 40 plus years, is likely to retire someday. And we want to be prepared for that. So that is currently posted. And then we're also currently recruiting for an emergency programs veterinarian. And this person, of course, can help with poultry and like that. But also could then work on planning, preparedness, and response for all hazards. So there's a new rescue room. They can be the lead for the agency's participation in secure food supply plans, and then natural disasters and whatever else. So those positions, like I said, were the only two vacancies in the agency, and so we've reclassed those, and those are currently posted. And so recruiting veterinarians can take a while, and so some applications, but it could be a long-term process to get those filled. One of the other things that we're in the process of doing, and this is on your agenda today, is that we're kind of reorganizing our animal programs and animal health, animal care staff. And so what we're proposing or to do is to promote Dr. Cooper and Dr. Whirling to assistant state veterinarians. And they would maintain their leadership in avian health and swine health, respectively. But then they would be actually org chart assistants to the state veterinarian. And by statute, in the statute for the Board of Animal Health, it says the board may appoint assistant state veterinarian. And it's just not been done, as far as I know. It's not my tenure. The director of the Animal Programs Division kind of de facto operated as the assistant when needed, but it's never been formal, and no one's ever had that title that I'm in recent history. And so then, as a part of that, also then, for the current Animal Programs Division, which we may rename to the Division of Animal Health and Stewardship. We will be promoting Brandy Harden to be the director of that division. So for you today, I guess it's 2 items. One, just because of the way that the statute is worded and that the board may appoint assistant state veterinarian, we would put before you today a request to approve the appointment of Dr. Cooper and Dr. Rowan as assistant state veterinarians. These would not need the approval of the governor. So that's the first item. That was quick, but if you have questions.
Well, if you're looking to make the office more efficient, then obviously it's something that needs to happen. So I move to appoint Dr. Cooper and Dr. Whirling as assistant state veterinarian.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Dr. Ragland, seconded by Dr. Hall. Discussion? Gary, would you like to call the roll again?
Dr. Armstrong. Keith Beer.
Aye.
Yep, thank you. Keith Beer.
Aye.
Virgil Bremer.
Aye.
Brad Fisher.
Aye.
Dr. Hafner.
Aye.
Dr. Hall.
Aye.
Dr. Hartwell.
Aye.
Dr. Ty Harberger.
Aye.
Larry Hopkins.
Aye.
Dr. Ragland.
Aye.
And Dave Hartman.
Aye.
Related, you have in your packet a document which is delegation of authority and succession. The current version, and this is a document that basically is the board giving direction to the agency as to what should happen should the state veterinarian be able to fulfill the role unexpectedly. So, obviously, at any time, the board could meet and make an interim state veterinarian or do what needed to happen, but if something happened suddenly and immediately and the agency needed, the position of state veterinarian needed to make a decision, who would do that? So currently that's, we have a current document, I think it's, currently it is the director of the animal program. So this would basically change that to say now that the assistant state veterinarian would be, and since we have more than one then, it would then be the person with the most tenure as assistant state veterinarian, and since they're being on the same day, then who has the most tenure with the agency first. So who would fill in. So that is before you also for approval today.
So I think again, where, you know, just part of any sort of contingency planning or what have you, it probably needs to happen. So with that, I move that adopt this delegation of authority and succession as proposed.
Second.
Okay, the delegation of authority and succession plan has been moved by Dr. Ragland and seconded by Dr. Hall. Any discussion? With none,
So would that be Dr. Whirling then or Dr. Cooper?
same question. I was gonna wait. That's all right, you're fine. You're fine. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, Carrie, please call the roll.
Dr. Armstrong.
Aye.
Keith Beer. Virgil Bremer.
Aye.
Brad Fisher.
Aye.
Dr. Hafner.
Aye.
Dr. Hall.
Aye.
Dr. Hartwell.
Aye.
Harberger.
Aye.
Mary Hopkins.
Aye.
Dr. Ragland.
Aye.
And Dave Hartman.
Aye. Okay, continuing on, the board fiscal year 2028-2029 biennial budget request.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk through with you what the Board of Animal Health is going to be submitting as potential change packages. As you can, the document in your packet is called the agency overview, and this is a draft. In that, we're going to describe the agency programs, the challenges, opportunities, the successes that we've had in the last couple of years, and then what we project in the next year. And then a part of that is the description of change packages. I just wanted to talk through with the board what those are, so you know at this point in the process. If you have any input, I'd be happy to hear that today. The first, I'm looking at Appendix A, which is page 10 of that document. The first two relate to the career ladder proposal that we've submitted. We have before the State Personnel Department right now a proposal to create new senior inspector classifications for dairy inspectors and poultry inspectors and animal health specialists. These are our frontline inspector positions. This would allow us to, if they are created, to promote people from an inspector to a senior inspector. Right now, if you have an inspector, the only way they can get a promotion is to do a different job. So we like for the opportunity for promotion to recognize experience and training, and without taking them out of that inspector role. And so, right, like I said, that request is with the State Personnel Department. That would create the classifications. But this particular, these two change packages would be requesting additional funds so that we can promote a number of people into those senior roles with the raise. There's two different packages because the budget for meat poultry is a separate budget, and so it's a different fund, so we need one very none of them. As you can see, those are the first two on the list there. And then the meat poultry one, I think, is listed first. That would be the state share, the potential increase in salaries because of the number of people promoted. We would also then have to request additional funds from USDA. And then the number two one there is specialist in dairy inspector. Turning the page into 3, the third one on our list. When we decided to take those two positions and recruit those two veterinarians, one of those positions was from dairy, which we were going to use for a dairy plant specialist. And so obviously we don't have that position anymore. The dairy division, 2020, the dairy division had 20 full-time staff, and they're down to 14 and a half at the moment. So this request would be for funds to add a full-time dairy inspector position, plant specialist. Combined with that request would be a request to add an epidemiologist who could round out the animal health team. Currently, and a veterinary epidemiologist, this would be to add an epidemiologist, so veterinarian, to help with all the programs I talked about with respect to the veterinarians that we created. So that is those two together. It was package number 3 as listed there. And then number 4, we could add 2 positions from poultry. One would be an inspector, frontline inspector. The second one would be for called a rating officer. It's really an EIAO. So the EIAO position is important, particularly with respect to the CIS program, Product Eventually Shipment Program. The number of plants in that program continues to increase in the request for that. Continue to increase. It takes a lot of time for our director and assistant director to deal with USDA plants. So the request would be to add a rating officer, and then an inspector position would be to be used for a frontline inspector as needed. Rubber quality statements. So there's 2 positions there, and again, that the request the numbers there, that would be for the state portion of that. We're going to have to get additional funding from the USDA. And the other items are more technical in nature. We currently have a captive program, service programs dedicated fund that collects fees from the hunting preserves. And so as those fees have increased, increase in fees need to be appropriated. So that's what that is. I'll skip down to the bottom. We did have this document, the potential new request for a veterinary student loan assistance repayment program. That was something that we considered having as an agency initiative in the next session bill to create it, and then this would be a companion request for funds. Since this was put together, just recently we learned that the agency will not have an agency bill to create a veterinary student loan assistance repayment assistance program. So therefore, I'm going to delete that one out. So that's not going to be an agency initiative this session. That's no longer relevant. And then, of course, you've heard all about the change back to the stores list. So really, I want to just highlight the request that the agency has for additional funds. Items that are not included in this because of the way that they're doing the budget this year would be increases for standard operating, all standard operating items, increase in health insurance, technology, fees that we pay other agencies. We pay a fee to the state personnel department for their services, for a fee to the budget agency for centralized accounting services. So those, to the extent that we need additional funds for those items, which we do, the Office of Management budget has told all the agencies that they're going to take care of it. So we'll see what happens with that. So that's not, so the operating part of the budget really, there are no change packages for that. It's all personal. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
Any other questions for Gary? Okay, moving on.
Real quick.
Okay.
Just that. We did send along for your just awareness purposes, our interns, they hinted at this at the last meeting, put together, looked across the north central USAHA district, which is about 10 to 12 states, just a cost, salary comparison across different positions within the Board of Animal Health, just to get an understanding of where we are at. Are we competitive with our neighbors or not? I will say it is imperfect. It's not a peer reviewed, it's really hard to find apples to apples across agencies, across states. But they were able to dig in and try to get as close a comparison as possible. And I think it was quite telling, that some of the information that they were able to provide and where we are, especially for our frontline inspectors, so animal health specialists, meat inspection and dairy inspection roles, that we have got, we're pretty far behind where our neighboring states are. So we've had a request for more just additional information in that space from industries, and so we had the interns put that together, but wanted to make that information available to you all as well. Just know that it is on our radar, and we are looking to. We think it's a key component to retention of our team, but then navigating that through state government, we're actively looking at the various ways we're able to do that, because it's not as straightforward as you might hope it is.
I mentioned the strategic workforce plan. One of our contributions to that is a request to state personnel to evaluate the pay ranges for all of our positions in the agency. We provided the data that you just mentioned to the state personnel department. So we'll see where that goes. But part of our overall.
Dr. Shipman, Gary, I'll ask a question. I know with the Ag Regulatory Task Force meetings that the legislature's been having, we're kind of hoping it'd be left
left alone and not thrown in, but is that an avenue where, again, this board's constituencies can speak to the legislature about the disparity, salary disparities compared in not just this agency, but even the State Department of Agriculture, compared to our neighboring states. Just trying to highlight the fact that, you know, we're all of you are working at a slight disadvantage compared to your peers.
Of course, yeah, that task force has had its first meeting,
Yes.
and there are 2 more scheduled. Don't know what the agenda is for the second or third one, but so far, the Board of Animal Health has not been asked for any commissions.
I know some of the livestock groups are being asked to speak at the second. They were originally supposed to be on the agenda for the first meeting, but now they've been shunted to the second. And I know obviously some of them are going to be talking about what we've spent the lion's share of today's meeting talking about and trying to highlight the need for, you know, capital request for the animal disease diagnostic lab, but also, I guess I just want to say, is that a venue to also include this information that you've said?
I mean, I think it
agency.
depends on the agenda, I think, but also I think, you know, that's only that up to the commodities. If that's, I don't know what instructions they've been given in terms of, I don't know what the request has been under those groups when they present at the meeting, what they've been asked to present. So, like I said, we're obviously keeping an eye on that group, but we've not been asked to participate or to provide information for that one.
Okay.
And I think the challenge that we kind of face is first there's that awareness piece, right? And then there's what do you do about it? And we're actively trying to navigate what do you do about it within state government. And I know other folks may take other approaches. The challenge that we have is, and that's the point that Gary was getting to, is, you know, we're requesting the state personnel department to take a comprehensive look at the pay scales for our employees because they're not external facing to anyone, right? And so they're a hard group to get to. And so, you know, we've had folks even say, hey, if we get you all the money you need, would you be able to spend it? Right? Because, you know, just because you have it doesn't mean the pay scales magically change. And so we're trying to, you know, pull the levers that are available within state government currently through this, that plan's called, the strategic workforce plan.
Okay.
With the hopes that, you know, we can at least start setting up and maybe adjust the pay scales, we can then have a conversation about matching money and dollars up.
Well, I do think the state personnel department is looking at pay scales across state government. Just we're trying to make sure that they include animal health concerns when they.
Okay. We know we're not alone either for the pay scale. But in the very short term, we do have the career ladder piece submitted to state personnel to try to bridge the gap and keep some hope alive. Because, yeah, again, the retention piece has been a very real challenge.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions for Gary or Dr. Shipman about the salary requests? All right. Kyle.
I'll be brief. So only thing I want to just hit today, since you all have last met, is the USDA announced on the 31st of July the detection of classical scrapie in a slaughtered sheep out of Oregon. They are challenged with this case because there was not any traceability around this animal, so they're trying to figure out where it may have came from. Unfortunately, what this does do is it sets us back on our ability to declare national freedom. We were, in order to declare national freedom of scrapie, you need to go 7 years without a detection of this prion. We were previously set to declare that freedom January of 28. So we had made it about 5 years without a case. And unfortunately, this detection does reset the entire country back at least an additional 7 years, so back to 2033. To date, they are still working on epidemiological investigations, so they're genotyping the animal to see if they can find any genetics related to it, to see if they can trace where this may have came from. But that is it's a pretty significant setback in the small ruminant world with that detection. As far as Indiana, we continue to do scrapie surveillance across the state. Our veterinary epidemiologist was able to provide me numbers for this fiscal year, federal fiscal year, which will end at the end of September. We have currently met our surveillance targets for goats, and we are working towards, we're at about 81% in meeting our sampling requirements for sheep. The challenge that the entire country is up against is with the federal shutdown federal quarter last year, it has significantly set back all states in the amount of surveillance they've been able to conduct. So for perspective, the numbers USDA gave us in January of 2025, so last federal fiscal, they had about 8,300 samples collected across the country. That same time this fiscal year, they were at 4,300. So a pretty substantial decrease in the amount of surveillance they've been able to collect nationally. So we're pretty happy with the numbers we do have, especially already having those goat numbers met, and we'll continue to work towards getting those sheep sampling numbers. So again, we can maintain our scrapie-free status, and we are also actively working towards Indiana is one of the states prior to this detection last week that had one of the more recent cases of scrapie. So we are getting closer to